Rainbow Six Siege is one of the most popular games in the world right now, introducing so many new people to the franchise, and although Siege, for some diehard fans, may not be their cup of tea, it's hard to deny the success of the game and the fan base it has amassed. And although Siege isn't the first title in the Rainbow Six franchise, the operators introduced in this game are something which Ubisoft are carrying forward with their storytelling and new entries. So when you have something popular, you of course want to expand it even more, and Ubisoft have tried that a few times. And let's just say that their success rate is pretty poor. So in this video, we're going to be looking at every single Rainbow Six Siege spin-off which ended up failing, and hopefully we can get a successful product in the future. So Tom Clancy's Elite Squad was a free-to-play action RPG for mobile devices. It was like your typical RPG turn-based game where you have a squad of characters, you face off against some enemies, and you take a turn using an ability from each character to take down the enemy team and progress. You go through the missions, you level up your characters, unlock some more, and this game was a Tom Clancy game, so many of the characters came from Rainbow Six, but as well as this, you also had Ghost Recon, The Division, Splinter Cell, Hawk, and Tom Clancy's End War. Now, with this game already being extremely generic with just a bunch of Tom Clancy characters placed in it, the game already faced controversy before its launch. In the game's narrative, there is a fictional terrorist group by the name of Umbra. And in the reveal trailer for this game, it showed their symbol being similar to the one used with the Black Lives Matter movement. This caused a lot of controversy, and as you see, there's even a BBC article about it as well, and Ubisoft would respond to this by updating the game and removing this imagery, and it was honestly just a mess. The game would release in the Philippines on March 23rd, 2020, and worldwide on August 25th, 2020, and I installed it. I played it for like a day or two, I got some of the characters, played through some of the missions, and then kind of forgot about it. Then, less than a year after its launch on July 7th, 2021, Ubisoft would announce that this game would be getting shut down, which would subsequently happen on October 4th, 2021. So basically, the game was announced, had a controversy, no one really played it, and then it shut down within a space of a year. But yes, it did have Rainbow Six characters. Right, so the Rainbow Six board game might be one of the messiest projects ever related to Rainbow Six, to the point where it caused the company behind it to go into liquidation because it was that poorly managed. So the Rainbow Six board game was announced in February of 2021. Despite being a Rainbow Six Siege product, this wasn't being made by Ubisoft, rather a company called Mythic Games, who had the license to make this. Now, this wasn't their first rodeo with board games, that was actually their specialty, and just like their other board games, they done this through a Kickstarter. Due to the fact that board games are quite expensive to make, especially with all the modeled pieces of operators, it gives them an understanding on interest by buyers if people invest in it, and then they get the board game out of it. Now, a major incentive to actually back the board game was some exclusive pieces, such as a special edition Zero figure, and of course, cosmetics in the game itself, which were advertised as entirely exclusive to the Rainbow Six board game backers. So this seemed pretty good. We were getting a cool physical product for our Siege fans, and we were actually getting rare exclusive skins in-game, with the creative director of Siege at the time even tweeting saying how cool it is that these skins are going to be extremely rare. So with a goal of $100,000, the game would actually get 10,884 backers, meaning that the company had a backing amount of $1.5 million. They flew right past their goal and they had almost 11,000 backers, all interested in this board game. Right, what could go wrong? Well, at first, things seemed fine. They would give us constant updates on the Kickstarter page about the progress of the game, new models which are coming, some things that they're tweaking, and overall updates and stuff they've actually added due to how well it has been received and how much backing they got. Everyone seemed happy. Now, it was starting to take a little bit longer than we wanted it to. However, a year after this initial backing started, we would be given the exclusive skins in the game, some of which you may have seen. Now, although people still had no board game, this was a nice sign that things were continuing, maybe a bit slower than what they wanted. However, we got our skins and we were like, okay, I'm starting to see a return on my investment. But not long after these skins would release, things would get a bit messy. Mythic Games would claim that they actually didn't have exclusive rights to these board game skins, and that Ubisoft will be releasing them separately next year in-game. This led to a lot of controversy, and myself speaking up quite vocally here, because not only did the Kickstarter page have it advertised in so many different ways that these skins were Kickstarter exclusive for people who backed the board game, but Siege's creative director at the time, Leroy, literally blatantly said that these skins were going to be exclusive. So I made it very clear that both from a Ubisoft perspective and a Mythic Games perspective, these were advertised as exclusive, and this was blatantly false advertising, and many people put hundreds of dollars behind a project with this advertising in the way. Not only were Mythic Games beginning to mishandle this project, but as were Ubisoft. With no project in people's hands, and now the skins being up in the air, people were getting a bit mad. We still had no physical board game. Then in April of 2023, over 2 whole years since the board game was fully backed with that $1.5 million pledge, Mythic Games would come to every single one of their backers asking for even more money, depending on what level you pledged. So if you were like me, who got the all-in with every piece of content, I was now being asked to pay an additional $129 on top of my original investment. Keep in mind, this was after we still had no physical product and the entire controversy with the skins as well. And basically, it got to a point where if you didn't pay this extra pledge, you simply just couldn't get your product. It was, in a sense, being held ransom, for lack of better terms. So, unsurprisingly, many people would begin a refund process, and this would clearly take a hit with the company. They would eventually be able to ship the board game to people who did this extra pledge, like myself, in March of 2024. I still have it beside me in a box and I've hardly touched it, but many people who originally backed it never got the board game. As well as this, Ubisoft would go on to release a few of the skins in the in-game shops. However, I would be vocal about this, and they would not only remove the skins from the store, but not continue to release any of the other ones. Why? I don't think they actually truly realized the extent of the situation, and honestly, keeping those skins in the store, when it was advertised differently, may have actually had legal consequences, so they're lucky that it didn't stay for long. But again, I was very vocal about this, and honestly, I probably helped them. But in October of 2024, Mythic Games, the creator of the Rainbow Six board game, would go into liquidation. And as of February of 2025, the project would be acquired by a company called Steamforged. They would reprint the R6 board game under their more clearly better structure as a company, and they would offer a discounted bundle for the people who originally pledged the game, and obviously tried to get refunds as well, and hopefully got their refunds, so they could actually buy the board game they wanted with the price that they originally invested. So massive shout out to Steamforged for honoring those people who invested years ago and actually wanted to get the board game, which they never got. So as I stand right now, I'm looking at the R6 board game beside me. I have it. It was a product that was made by Mythic Games. It is pretty good. The quality is great throughout the stuff. I cannot deny that. But the amount of mismanagement throughout this entire saga, to the point where it took 3 years to deliver, all the controversy through the way, Ubisoft clearly not doing a good job as well, and resulting in the liquidation of Mythic Games. I'm not very surprised it ended up that way, as someone who followed it throughout. So yeah, it's a good product, but everything else that went with it kind of made it not really desirable, and it was an absolute mess. Now, Rainbow Six Extraction is what you can call a true spin-off to Rainbow Six Siege, spinning off of an event which was available in Siege known as the Outbreak event, and taking place in a branching different timeline from that of Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Extraction in its truest form is a what-if spin-off scenario. Now, originally back in early 2018, with the release of Operation Chimera in Rainbow Six Siege, the game would be introduced to an entirely new PvE experience for a limited time, known as Rainbow Six Siege Outbreak. An old Soviet spacecraft would crash into Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, where a local scrapyard owner would attempt to recover the wreckage. However, inside, he would be affected by this alien-like parasite, causing him to get sick, and he would make his way to the hospital. It's here where the virus would spread, and it would cause people to turn into these alien zombie-like beings, which would spill the end of the world if not contained. So we would be posed the question, what if the world's greatest counter-terrorism unit faced a threat that wasn't from this world? Which would result in an interesting premise. And not only was that an interesting premise, Outbreak was genuinely fun. You and 2 other players would squad up in a team of 3, consisting of both attackers and defenders, since Rainbow is one-sided team, and gameplay is of course a training-esque scenario, of course with a lot of different, lore let go there because it's gameplay, but the idea, of course, is that Rainbow are one team, and we got to see that here with attackers and defenders being playable together, and you were fighting off against this outbreak. There were multiple different missions, and basically the outbreak would be contained to New Mexico, and Rainbow would be sent in to not only extract a doctor to help find a cure, but also save Jaeger when his helicopter would go down, and of course all the antics which happen along the way with a apocalypse-style story. The event was dark, it was hard, it was gritty, it was interesting, the graphics were beautiful, the new enemies were interesting. It introduced so many new gameplay mechanics, such as the dash ability, which would later be applied to Oryx, but more importantly the knockback, which would be first applied to Nomad's air jab. Not only did Outbreak introduce so many new gameplay mechanics which would be later applied to operators, but it was genuinely such a unique, fun, and interesting experience. This mode would run from the 6th of March to the 3rd of April in 2018, and once it concluded, it was never seen again. However, the amount of development and manpower that went into this mode cannot be underestimated. This was such a massive feat for the team, and many of us were surprised that this was a limited time mode. We actually thought that they should make this permanent, and this could be the sort of COD Zombies to the COD multiplayer, but for Rainbow Six Siege. Well, Outbreak would conclude, and we would just continue with our natural progression of Siege seasons, and we'd kind of just leave it in the past and be like, hey, that was really fun. Well, in 2019, during Ubisoft's E3 appearance, yes, E3 was still a thing, we would get a cryptic trailer of a man in a dark room clearly being infected. We would hear gunshots, and then eventually, Ella and Vigil would enter the frame, with the game being revealed to be Rainbow Six Quarantine, a fully fledged standalone spin-off of the Outbreak event, carrying it to an entirely new game. Now, this was an insane amount of hype. Not only were we getting more Outbreak, but it was a standalone game. We were getting another Rainbow Six title, with Siege still being very popular, and we get to see our operators in an entirely new game. People were freaking out about Quarantine. If it could look anything like Outbreak, but with just even more to it, sort of like that Left 4 Dead COD Zombie style, we were gonna eat it up. And so Quarantine was announced, and we were hyped. And then that was kind of just it. Rainbow Six Quarantine was announced. We didn't hear anything about this game for almost 2 years. People didn't really know what was happening. They didn't know it was cancelled. No one really knew. Well, in February of 2021, there would be reports that there was some public gameplay testing happening for a game called Rainbow Six Parasite, which was seemingly the brand new name of Rainbow Six Quarantine. Why? Well, we just came out of 2020. Maybe they were trying to avoid naming stuff similar to a virus we just had in the real world. They didn't really want the name Quarantine because, well, that was actually used in a real life setting for over a year at this point. I guess they wanted to move away from that, so they went with Parasite. I still thought Quarantine was the better name, but oh well, Rainbow Six Parasite it is. And just a few months later, we would finally get our full reveal of Rainbow Six Extraction? Okay, it changed name again. Right, Rainbow Six Extraction. Oh well, it may have changed name 3 times, but we're finally getting our sequel to the amazing Outbreak event. Now, I wasn't a creator at this time. 2021 was before my time. I kind of came around the scene in 2023, but during this time, what Ubisoft decided to do was, alongside Extraction's reveal, they were actually going to allow content creators to post gameplay from early access and allow them to say anything they wanted about the game. Now, I'll give some commendations to Ubisoft there. They didn't force people to say anything good about the game. I've never been forced to say anything about any of the previews I get or anything. They've never told me I have to explicitly say anything about one of their products. And I will always give Ubisoft commendation for that. However, this kind of backfired a bit because Rainbow Six Extraction was revealed, the cinematic trailer looked sick, and then everyone watched the content creators' videos about the gameplay. And I'll be brutally honest, I don't think I saw a single creator like anything about this game. Everyone said it was boring, it was too easy, there was nothing really happening, the gameplay loop just kind of got repetitive pretty fast, and Extraction was nothing like what the Outbreak event was. Not to mention, people were not happy with the price tag. So we had the reveal, People weren't very hyped for the game. Ubisoft would respond by lowering the price of the game. They would lower the standard edition to $39.99. Rather than it being like your full price $60 title. So that was nice. And after another delay, it would release in January of 2022. But unfortunately, the writing was kind of already on the wall for Extraction. They launched it on Game Pass because, let's be honest, there just wasn't much hype here. The game got mid-reviews. People didn't really care for it that much. It did get its fan base, and I'll admit there was moments where I actually genuinely really enjoyed this game. However, it was just so far from what made Outbreak great. The art style completely changed. The enemies literally got, you know, cleansed as well. Instead of them being these sort of brutalist zombie aliens, they were now these just sludge parasites called Archaeans, so they just had no visual identity anymore. It did adapt the lore of what came from the Outbreak event, which was pretty cool, but again, it feels like we just softened the game. It wasn't as dark and gritty as Outbreak was. We kind of just got this sanitized version, which was not only a step down in gameplay, but was just a step down in identity, and the gameplay loop itself was fine, but without updates, what really more was there? Well, in the first year of content, we did get Zofia and Echo as additional operators. We got no new maps. We got a few different game modes, which get rotated, and that was it. They cut any further content from the game. We knew we were meant to be getting more operators, such as Jackal, for example, and Ying. Neither of them released. They just moved everyone off this project. They still, to this day, haven't officially announced that Rainbow Six Extraction is shut down, because technically the servers are still up, but they never told players that, oh, we're not updating the game anymore. Basically, we had to learn this from some random Ubisoft support employee who was like, oh yeah, we're not working on Extraction anymore. That's how we got the news. Extraction had potential, but it was so far from the original vision. It clearly wasn't the Rainbow Six Quarantine that they wanted to make back in 2019, and this was just a very clear example of a project which had been restarted multiple times. They clearly didn't have a vision. Whoever had the vision initially wasn't on the project anymore, and it ended up just being a project that was finally pushed out the door because they needed a return on their investment, and there was no plans to continue it further. It's an absolute shame, because Outbreak was great. The entire what if scenario against the Archaeans and these aliens was actually a really cool premise. It's just a shame that it was clearly mismanaged throughout the way, and what we got was a dud of a game, which is still playable, but is kind of dead. Good luck finding a game, and there's nothing really interesting in it anymore. I've made countless videos about Extraction. I enjoyed it for what it was. I think it could have been better. I think they could have saved it. I think they could have done so many different things even after launch, but they gave up. They already knew that they didn't want to do it anymore. They just launched the game, finished in the marketing, and got their money and moved back to other projects, which is fair. You have to count a loss sometimes, but it just shouldn't have gotten to this point, in my opinion. Rainbow Six SMOL is a top-down isometric roguelike shooter based on Rainbow Six Siege, and was available on Netflix for handheld devices. Yes, this was part of Netflix's games. This was clearly just a contractually obliged game, in my opinion. Someone on Reddit found that it's literally just built off of a game called Tiny from 3 years ago, and clearly they just stuck the Rainbow Six rights on it, and they made a game off of it. I'm not really dissing it. It was decently fun for what it was. It was just your top-down kind of just shooting things and enemies, but you had Siege characters, Deimos was in it, you had barricades and gadgets. It wasn't terrible, I'll be honest. Like, it was clear to me that this was just a contract game. They had a contract with Netflix. They probably had to get a Rainbow Six game. The best thing they do, find a studio that had a game which didn't really have any hype behind it, stick a Rainbow Six filter on it. Here we go. You've got Rainbow Six SMOL. I enjoyed the 40 minutes I played of it that one day. I never touched it again. I don't think you can even play it now. I think Netflix like shut down their game thing, so I think the only way to play it is if you find another alternative. But yeah, it was fine. Like, the core game itself was fun. So whatever that game was before, Tiny, that was a fun game. The Rainbow Six filter on it, pretty cool, I guess. But there's not really much more to say here, other than this was like clearly a contract game. They had to get something out. I enjoyed it for what it was. Does it fit the Rainbow Six franchise? I mean, no, not really. But yeah, it was alright. I don't think you can play it anymore. But this is less of a blow than like Extraction was, you know what I mean? Because they were actually trying with that, or at some point they were trying before they weren't. This just is what it was. It was a Netflix game. And it was fun, yeah. Tom Clancy's XDefiant, which would later just be known as XDefiant once they would drop the Tom Clancy part from the title and change some things about the game, was Ubisoft's answer to the arcade shooter genre, their competitor to Call of Duty. The game was announced in July of 2021 as a Tom Clancy title, taking a bunch of characters from the Clancyverse, very similar to how Elite Squad did it, and turning it into, well, a arcade shooter. This would take characters from Ghost Recon, The Division, Splinter Cell, and Rainbow Six. After quite a negative reveal, Ubisoft would kind of bring the game back a bit and change it. Instead of being a Tom Clancy title, they would drop this and expand it to the rest of their universes, keeping many of these Tom Clancy IPs, such as The Division, Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, and Splinter Cell, but now they would add some of their other IPs, such as Far Cry, Watch Dogs, and later Assassin's Creed. Instead of it being a celebration of Tom Clancy games, it was a celebration of Ubisoft games, and technically that wasn't a horrible thing. Ubisoft had a lot of very popular IPs, and mashing them together in an arcade shooter kinda was better than it sounded on paper, and it resulted in a pretty fun game in my opinion. Now there would be some versions of the game playable all the way back in 2021, I think that was the earliest I actually had a chance to play it, but it wouldn't release until all the way in 2024. Now, you can kind of see a pattern with some of the issues with these games. Think of Extraction, for example. The game would be announced, there'd be a lot of hype, and then it would kind of just dwindle and then eventually release and be a bit lackluster. Now, it wasn't technically lackluster. XDefiant actually launched pretty well. There was a lot of hype behind it. A lot of people were actually quite into it. They were praising many of the aspects of the game. It was, of course, a free-to-play game as well, so it was sort of itching a lot of people's scratch when COD wasn't really hitting well either. XDefiant had promise, and people were kind of on board with it. We also had roadmaps revealed that more content from other Ubisoft titles were coming. We would get some DLCs, which would include Assassin's Creed, as well as a crew map based on their crew franchise. But the most important one for this video is that we would get a DLC based on the German GSG-9 faction from Rainbow Six Siege, as well as the map Clubhouse, fully playable now in XDefiant. This is, of course, a celebration of this aspect of Siege. We had Blitz's shield, we had operators that looked like IQ. This is a perfect crossover, and this faction was really fun to play, and Clubhouse was an absolutely incredible map. It was setting up for the future of XDefiant, and especially the Siege content we could have got in that game, and I truly had some fun here. But in an absolutely mind-boggling decision, after XDefiant would be released on the 21st of May 2024, it would be announced on the 3rd of December 2024. Yes, only half a year after the game actually released, that they were going to be shutting it down, with the shutdown happening on the 3rd of June 2025. Yes, this game didn't even get a chance to find its footing. People enjoyed it. If you mention XDefiant to this day, you'll have a lot of people stand up and be like, hey, I actually really enjoyed XDefiant. I would have liked to have seen what more came to it. And prior to its shutdown, they would release a sunset update with a bunch of unreleased content they were still working on, some coming from games such as Rayman and showing some future ideas. And we would actually learn that there was planned to be even more Rainbow Six factions, such as the Spetsnaz and even more. But unfortunately, we would never see that happen. Considering it was revealed in 2021, when it still had the Tom Clancy branding and was still a playable game at that time, we can only imagine how long that game was actually in development. The amount of money that went into this game only for them to shut it down within the space of half a year and not even really give it a chance is actually very shocking in my opinion, and I can only imagine the amount of money that went to waste here. Very poetically as well, this game had skins based on Rainbow Six Extraction, a game that Ubisoft recently killed, and then soon they would kill this game as well. So yeah, there's a bit of poetry there, I guess. But yeah, I enjoyed XDefiant for what it was. And I don't really want to dwell on this one for too long, but I guess we should mention Dillfront. This isn't really a spin-off game, rather this was going to be a permanent mode added to Siege, which came in Year 10 Season 2. This was going to be a permanent mode on top of our existing 5v5 mode, but in this mode, where it's a 6v6, attackers and defenders can play on the same team, and it's a much bigger map with different objectives, and it's more of this sort of gain the area tug-of-war with different objectives. I enjoyed Dillfront for what it was. Many people didn't. It didn't find its footing, and as of Year 11 Season 2, the mode is gone. They decided not to waste any more resources on it. It was intended to be a permanent mode, but now it's gone, so I guess we can call this a failure spin-off as well, even though it was a part of the main game. Yeah, Dillfront is gone. I enjoyed it. Other people enjoyed it. Many people didn't. Bob's your uncle. There's not really much more to say about Dillfront, which I haven't already said. They tried, they failed. We're back to focusing on core Siege. So let's recap the position we're in. We had Tom Clancy's Elite Squad shut down. We had the Rainbow Six board game, just a complete mess of a situation, and we did eventually get it in the end. We had Rainbow Six Extraction. It's dead. They're not adding anything to that game. We had XDefiant, which, although having its fans, was very short-lived and honestly should have been given more of a chance. We had Dual Front in Rainbow Six Siege, and also we had Rainbow Six SMOL. The only thing which is still going is Rainbow Six Mobile. Is it doing well? I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know. I see people enjoy it. I don't know. Does it have the audience it needs to keep going? I guess we'll find out. Am I confident about the future of Rainbow Six Mobile? No, I'm not. I'm truly not. I feel like mobile may not last, as much as I hate to say that, because it's actually a really good game. So yeah, Ubisoft just cannot seem to branch Rainbow Six outside of Siege right now. I hope their next, adventure into that realm is good and they can actually do it. But I think there's so many things they can learn along the way here. And I don't think the issue is simply that people don't want a Rainbow Six title. I think there's a lot of mismanagement that's went through all of these here. And it's clear that they're not making products which are, actually valuable. It's a bit of a shame that one of the best games here is actually SMOL. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think they need to really reevaluate the brand. I assume that maybe with the whole Vantage Studios thing, they are taking a proper look at the Rainbow Six franchise and they start making meaningful, proper games which actually have visions and aren't being restarted multiple times, aren't being thrown out the door. We can actually have substantial new additions to the franchise. But yeah, did I miss anything? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts. Have a great rest of your day. And yeah, have you played any of these games? Sub if you haven't already, and have a safe one.